Hey everyone, it's Peter Brown standing in for freelance reviewer Heidi Kemps for her review of Fire Emblem Echoes: Shadows of Valentia. Fire Emblem Echoes, a remake of a very early game in the series, is a departure of sorts from what most veteran players expect from a Fire Emblem game on 3DS. Rather than emphasizing character relationships and story dialogue, Echoes puts its focus on long-term and short-term strategy and strength building. The end result is a fresh take on the Fire Emblem strategy formula, and one that ranks among the best in the 3DS's library. Echoes follows the dual leads of and Celica, a pair of youths that bear a strange crest upon their hands. They bond together as children in a tiny farming village, only to be torn apart by a sudden dramatic event. Many years after the fact, you're in control of both characters and their respective armies, in search of a reunion amongst a conflict-ridden yarn spun of large-scale wars, hidden pasts, and shocking truths. While the story is classic Fire Emblem fare, the emphasis here is centered firmly on the saga of and Celica, with only a few brief interludes that shift focus to other army members. The characters you welcome into your ranks and interact with are a charming and likable bunch, and almost all in-game character text is voiced as well, which adds appreciable personality.
Hold it, you lecherous pigs! Huh? Who the hell are you?
Players more accustomed to recent Fire Emblem games like Awakening and Fates may feel a bit disappointed in the lack of side character interactions. You don't pair off characters in Echoes as you would in those games. While character-to-character support conversations do still exist, they're much shorter and happen strictly during combat. While this may be disappointing to some, overall it helps cement the story focus on the two leads and the various warring factions of Fire Emblem Echoes' world. While most of Echoes takes place on grid-based, turn-driven battlefields, you'll also spend a lot of time navigating an overworld map with two armies, one led by and the other by Celica, each with a different group of soldiers under their lead. You'll have to manage resources, weaponry, and stat building across two separate teams. Explorable towns, castles, shrines, forts, and dungeons are unique to Echoes, and while interactions with most areas are somewhat limited, basically restricted to examining environments with a cursor, dungeons offer a far more interesting twist for the series. Dungeons are explored on foot from a third-person perspective. You scout for secret passages and smash pots and crates for loot, all while avoiding, or seeking out, battles against roaming enemies. Touching a foe takes you to a traditional Fire Emblem battle, but once you've felled your opponents, it's right back to exploring. These areas serve as a great addition that offer variety beyond simply stringing together a series of battles, while still keeping the narrative focus on the core story.
I'll face down thieves or rogues any day, but terrors are different.
Oh, Bowie. How can you be so scared of spooks and spirits at your age?
Shove off, would you? A man can't help what gives him fright.
Echoes has some crucial differences from other Fire Emblem games that add interesting layers to army management and combat as well. Characters can only carry one item at a time, forcing you to carefully consider if a special weapon, a restorative item, or armaments like a shield and ring would be ideal to carry. Magic is learned through leveling up rather than buying tomes, and uses character hit points to cast, making high-powered spells a potentially risky proposition. Combat skills are learned by keeping specific items equipped in battle for long periods of time, and are tied to individual pieces of gear, meaning you can't just learn a skill and then re-equip your weapon as usual. Stamina wears down as characters fight and take damage, degrading their stats and combat capabilities unless they replenish it with food, medicine, or offerings to the goddess Mila. Finally, the rock-paper-scissors style weapon triangle of modern Fire Emblem games is gone entirely. Swords can now clash with spears on equal footing. These are all serious deviations from other Fire Emblem games, and they might take a bit of time to get used to, but they result in a Fire Emblem game that has a very distinct feel. You'll need to really stop and think about weapon distribution and upgrades, consider how to effectively use certain classes, when to take time with optional fights to build character levels, and so on. Echoes battles are generally difficult too, which makes conquering some of the game's toughest battles relatively unscathed feel like a real accomplishment. While the game's difficulty level makes formulating a sound strategy highly rewarding, there are times when grinding for experience becomes a necessary evil. Yet, it still manages to feel worth it. When you manage to pull off a victory against unlikely odds, pride and elation come in equal measure.
You're finished. Pretty good, right?
Helping you to secure those feelings is a brilliant new addition to gameplay called Mila's Turnwheel, which effectively acts as a rewind button during battle. Missed several attacks in a row? You can opt to spin back time a few turns and take a totally new approach instead. You can rewind time as much or as little as you like, provided you still have enough cogs in reserve for that battle. This wonderful system allows you to take back critical combat mistakes without having to reset a long and arduous battle, and is a tremendous boon in both casual and classic modes with permadeath. Once you run out of cogs though, you'll have to restart the level and take back mistakes, adding yet another nice layer of strategy to this mechanic. Is it really worth a cog to re-roll for a critical hit? Or should you save it for when you plan your final assault on the tough-as-nails enemy commander? Only you can make the call. Fire Emblem Echoes is a fantastic remake departure from modern Fire Emblem staples. What it lacks in interpersonal character relationships and user-controlled dating, it makes up for in meaty, challenging strategy gameplay, fun exploration sequences, and a tighter overall narrative. It may not be the sort of game that fans of recent Fire Emblem games are used to, but it thrives for what it is, a challenging tactics game that puts combat front and center.
This one's mine! Better than you expected?